Hey guys, it's Barry here. As you know, I usually do videos about GAMSAT Section 3, but I've been requested over the years to do some videos on Section 1, and today is the day. So I'm going to go through a couple of S1 questions using the same technique that I would in Section 3. So if you're going to take anything away from this video today, is that if you can tackle Section 1 questions, you should be able to tackle Section 3 questions and vice versa. So there are some transferable skills and there is some crossover between the two sections, as they are both called reasoning in their respective sciences, right? So Section 1 is reasoning in the social sciences and Section 3 is reasoning in the biological and physical sciences. So let's get started. Here we have a question from Des O'Neill's from the Humanities book. And as you know, I like to start off with the question. So let's have a read of the question. The passage suggests that the village gossip is. Okay, so this question is really referring to village gossip. And if I was to focus on a particular word, it probably would be the word gossip. Okay, we're trying to figure out something about what is suggested about it. And in Section 3, with these type of questions where there are, it's essentially asking which of the following is true, I like to use the answer options themselves as mini questions. So for example, I would be asking myself, does the passage suggest that gossip is amusing? Okay, that's a question I could ask myself. Or I might say, oh, is it suggesting that gossip is dangerous? Okay, that's what the answer options, are there to, that's how they guide us. So instead of trying to figure out what is the passage suggesting, we're also trying to figure out, is it suggesting that it is amusing, dangerous, important, damaging, etc. So when I go and I looked for information in the passage, I am reading actively, or I'm reading with intention. Okay, I'm trying to find some specific information. First of all, let's try to see any references to gossip. So I like to use the keyword gossip, or the keywords I should say, to try to filter and find anything obvious. So I can see the word gossip straight away in the first paragraph as well as in the last paragraph. Okay, now because gossip is in the first sentence of the first paragraph, I'm going to read that just to have a quick look. Okay, so it says, indeed, the function of this gossip, which in fact is close oral daily history, is to allow the whole village to define itself. So what I've essentially been able to find out about gossip, just really quickly, is that gossip has a function, and it functions by helping the village define itself. Okay, so that's something that I've essentially figured out already. Now, because we're trying to find out what the passage is suggesting about gossip, I think it's important to pick words that are associated with gossip. So for example, right now, with the word gossip, I have a few word associations, which is that gossip has a function. Okay, let's read about gossip in the first paragraph. Now, because it's at the end, I will end up probably reading the first bit as well. So from the very beginning, most of what happens during a day is recounted by somebody before the day ends. The stories are factual, based on observation or on first-hand account. This combination of the sharpness of observation, of the daily recounting of the day's events and encounters, and of lifelong mutual familiarities is what constitutes so-called village gossip. So essentially, if you were to kind of summarize, I suppose, in terms of what it's talking about with gossip, or to find words that are associated with gossip, it's saying that the stories that are factual, and that are based on observation, that's what they are calling gossip. So another thing that you could say is that gossip could be associated with fact, or you can say that they are factual. So those are some words that I'm associating with gossip. Which, by the way, is not really what you would normally associate gossip with. Okay, it's really important to understand that when we're doing section 1 as well as section 3 questions is that we don't try to bring our own assumptions into this. You know, when I think about gossip, I think about things that are a bit unnecessary, a little bit infactual, very what do you say? Subjective, okay? But the text is suggesting words like factual and function, which is a bit different to what I would expect even. So now if we look at the answer options, I hope you can see that, you know, the words function and factual don't really mesh with it being amusing. Okay, it's not saying it's entertaining or funny, and it's not saying it's trivial either. Trivial would suggest that it's essentially not important, okay? So function and factual, okay, that doesn't sound like it's a good description of those things. It doesn't sound like it's dangerous either. However, function and factual do kind of lend themselves to the words important and valuable. So that's something pretty good. But let's just check the last option. Damaging. Does it sound like it's damaging? Function and factual? No. Unnecessary. That's kind of similar to like trivial or not important. That does not mesh very well with the words function and factual. I think the most similar words, or the things that have the most similar connotations to function and factual, would be important and valuable. Okay, so that would be my answer, and that is the correct key, the answer key as well. Let's keep on going. Question 70. Consider the following comments on a story about a son running away from home. Which one best typifies the attitudes of a gossiper, as described in lines 6 to 10? So it's essentially saying which of the following answer options, you can see that they are like comments in themselves, or some kind of conversation that's been had. Which of these is typical of the attitudes of a gossiper, described in lines 6 to 10? And if you have a look, that's really referring to paragraph 2. So let's have a quick read just to see what's going on. Let's get an idea of the attitude of a gossiper. Sometimes there is a moral judgment implicit in the story, but this judgment, whether just or unjust, remains a detail. The story as a whole is told with some tolerance because it involves those with whom the storyteller and the listener are going to go on living. Very few stories are narrated either to idealize or condemn, rather that they testify to the always slightly surprising range of the possible. So I tend to struggle with a lot of these type of questions, to be honest, but I've gotten better at kind of trying to understand what they are trying to get at. I think it's important that it says the story as a whole. It's kind of telling you what's important. So the story as a whole is told with some tolerance because it involves those with whom the storyteller and the listener are going to go on living. It's kind of suggesting that it's important that the people telling the gossip and the people listening to gossip are kind of doing this process because they're going to living with these people essentially. Okay, so I guess they how should you say it? They have a vested interest in the people that they are living with. Okay, they want to know what's going on. They want to be able to live with them. Okay, that's why this gossip is so important to them. And another thing is very few stories are narrated to idealizing or condemn. So it's trying to say that the whole point of the gossip is not just to condemn, it's rather to testify, which is to show evidence to the always slightly surprising range of the possible. Now, slightly range of the possible is kind of suggesting, slightly surprising range of possible is kind of saying that, first of all, things, these facts that we're talking about, or these occurrences, could be slightly surprising. Okay, that's something that's, I think, important as well. Okay, it's slightly surprising and impossible. So we're not talking about things that are, ridiculous, but things that might surprise. Okay, so if you have a look at the answer options, let's look at A. It's none of my business anyway, and quite frankly, I couldn't care less. this is definitely at odds with the fact that, you know, we're talking about the storyteller and the listener are going to be going on living with these people. So it's suggesting that no, they would care about other people. They do care about the people that they're staying with, essentially. Okay, so that doesn't quite make sense. Let's have a look at B. Didn't we always know that Mark would turn out to be a nasty piece of work? That sounds like just pure condemning, essentially, right? It's just, this is, I think, what they're referring to, saying that very few stories are narrated either to idealize or to condemn. Okay, condemn, which is essentially to, you know, say that they're really bad. Okay, saying that people are not really good. Okay, so again, that's not sounding pretty good. And then C, let's have a look. How is it that Mark could run off when he's always seemed so devoted to his parents? This sounds like, when, you know, from what the person is actually talking about, how is it that Mark could run off? That sounds like they're slightly surprised. And why are they surprised? They're surprised because he seemed so devoted to his parents. It didn't, you know, the fact that Mark ran off, it didn't make sense to the person, to the gossiper. I think this is a reference to the fact that they're talking about, you know, gossip is really just a way of talking about things that are kind of surprising. You're trying to make sense of these things that don't make sense to you. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Let's have a look at D. Claude and Murray brought the boy up so badly. It's a wonder he didn't take off sooner. Again, that sounds pretty condemning. And it's not really, again, it's not really meshing with what the paragraph 2 is talking about. Okay, that just sounds like condemnation only, really. Okay, so C looks pretty good, you know, that reference to the slightly surprising, I believe, and also because these are the people that you're living with. So they obviously knew Mark's parents. Right? You know the people that you are living with. So there's quite a few things suggesting that C, option C, or the third option, is correct. Okay, question 71. The comments may be spiteful or bigoted, but if so, they themselves will become a story, and thus in turn become subject to comment. This is from line 12 to 13. Thus, a story which began, Paul told me that his cousin Pierre made a right fool of himself yesterday, would typically finish something like this. So it's essentially saying, if a story, which they're really referring to a gossip, if the gossip was to start off as Paul told me that he made a fool of, Paul told me that his cousin Pierre made a right fool of himself yesterday, how would that finish? And if we were to refer back to line 12 to 13 and that extract that's been taken out of context, the whole comments may be spiteful or bigoted. So I guess that first bit you could suggest might be a little bit spiteful or, you know, not particularly nice, but then they themselves become a story and become the subject to comment. So what they're trying to say is not only do these comments begin as potentially just a comment in itself, but they're inviting they want to invite more comments, essentially. Okay, so that's how I interpret it. I wonder why Paul is always bad-mouthing Pierre. That is definitely, it's asking you to comment. Okay, can you tell me, why do you think Paul's always bad-mouthing Pierre? So it's inviting us to comment on this, okay, to give our opinion about what's going on. Okay, so that's actually sounding pretty good, actually. Whereas B, I don't believe a word of it though, and don't tell anybody. That's not really suggesting, this isn't really suggesting that we want any more comments, that we want the conversation to continue. So that's not sounding particularly good. Pierre should learn to be a bit more sensible about how much he drinks. Same kind of thing. Doesn't really sound like we're inviting the listener to make a comment. And then D, if only there weren't so many spiteful people in our community, we would all get along much better. The same kind of thing. This is really not inviting us to comment. It's just talking about their own opinion. Okay, so A is much better in terms of being in line with what the extract is trying to say. It's essentially saying that gossip in itself is inviting more gossip. It's inviting more comments themselves. Okay, question 72. What does the passage suggest about the village's relationship with the rest of the, this should be the world. I think I got this mixed, I got this. Should be the world. Okay, cool. With the rest of the world. Okay. And we can see that it's referring to a few things. The village is both socially, economically independent. You can see it's talking about the village being an idyll, which is the rest. I don't actually know how to pronounce this word. Please tell me in the comments how am I supposed to say this. But it's saying that the world is looking towards it nostalgically and longingly, or it might be saying that the village is productive. Again, talking about the economy, etc., etc. Now, if we're trying to figure out the village's relationship with the rest of the world, let's have a look at some keywords, I suppose. So one thing is looking for maybe something about the world itself and the relationship of it to the world. There's also references to like social and economic, and just based on that, I can see a lot of references to social economic over here, and then I see the word world. Okay, so I believe that we're probably reading in the last paragraph, just based on things like social, economic, and the word world. There's references to economy again over there in option B. So we're going to have a read of that sentence. Let's have a look. The life of a village, as distinct from its physical and geographic attributes, is perhaps the sum of all the social and personal relationships existing within it, plus the social economic relations, usually oppressive, which link the village to the rest of the world. Okay, I believe that most of the information should be there. Let's have a read. And we're going to see if there's any evidence for these statements. The village is both socially and economically entirely independent of the outside world. Now, I think the main thing that we're trying to fact check here is that the village is independent of the world. And I did read something about it saying that there is a link of the village. So here it says, which link the village to the rest of the world. The word link suggests that they are not independent with the outside world. Okay, they are connected to the outside world. So let's get rid of option A. That's not correct. Okay, B. The village is an idyll, I don't know what that is, which the rest of the world looks upon with nostalgia and longing. Now, I don't see any words that really mesh with nostalgia and longing at all. I mean, there's references to oppressive, like how you would describe potentially the relationship between maybe either the village and the world or the world and the village. Okay, so oppressive doesn't sound particularly nostalgic or longing. Okay, there's something not quite right about option B. Okay, let's have a look at option C. The village is productive and derives confidence from its status as part of the backbone of the country's economy. It never says the village is productive, by the way, right? If you're just reading about it, the life of the village as distinct from the physical geographical attributes is perhaps the sum of all the social and personal relationships existing within it, plus the social and economic relations. Okay, it doesn't say anything about productivity. You can have a look on, at the other paragraphs if you like, or the rest of the paragraph. But just a quick look never says that the village is productive. There's references to economy, but that's not quite right. Okay, through elimination, it's probably D, but let's have a read. The village creates its own sense of meaning and purpose. The rest of the world regards it as an object of exploitation. Okay, now, actually, we don't really see anything right now about its own sense of purpose, but if you read just before it, again, and we did read this earlier, indeed the function of this gossip, which in fact is close oral daily history, is to allow the village to define itself. So that's kind of to me the whole village defining itself or creating its own sense of meaning. Okay, there is some references to its own sense of meaning and purpose. Okay, so I think that that's definitely there. And then the rest of the world regards it as an object of exploitation. Now this one's a bit trickier, but I believe that the word exploitation and oppressive are somewhat related in that oppression and being oppressed and exploitation, these things can go hand in hand, right? People would oppress people by exploiting them, and I guess vice versa. So there seems to be some evidence that this is true. So D is looking pretty good. Okay, so there's two parts of this answer option. The first part is about the village having its own sense of meaning or purpose, which is kind of like the village defining itself, right? Defining and meaning is very similar. And then the world regarding it as an object of exploitation. I think that's a link to the word oppressive being used here. Okay, question 73. Why are the stories told with some tolerance in lines 7 to 8? So going back to lines 7 to 8, that's in paragraph in paragraph 2. And I think we've actually seen, we've talked about paragraph 2 already, if you recall. Okay, so which of these could be true? Let's have a look at some of these options, okay? Peasants naturally tend to be broad-minded and compassionate. Okay, now if you recall, we never read about that. Okay, it didn't really describe the peasants as being broad-minded and compassionate necessarily. Okay, so I'm not sure about that one. People in small community know that they need to get on with each other from day to day. That is, in my opinion, that is referring to the fact that, where is it? In that sentence, it says, as a whole, the story as a whole is told with some tolerance. This is referring to the tolerance because it involves those of whom the storyteller and listener are going to go on living. So again, it's saying that the gossip is tolerated essentially because they want to know more about the people that they're living with because they have to get on with them. Okay, that makes sense. You want to get on with them from day to day, so knowing about them is important. Okay, they need to know about the people that they deal with from day to day. That's looking like a pretty good option there. Okay, in terms of evidence for that option. With C, the gossiper feels morally superior in a position to patronize the victims of the gossip. The paragraph doesn't really describe gossip as being victimizing, in a way. It's not really attacking people. Again, thinking about all the questions kind of building up to this point, they're trying to suggest that gossip is really at the end of the day, a factual process. Okay, it's a story telling kind of thing, and it's for a way for people to kind of get to know each other, like know more about each other. Okay, so that's not looking pretty good. Option D, the gossip is usually about insignificant matters. There's no point in getting worked up about it. Again, this is not quite right. And I think this links back to earlier questions where we're trying to figure out what the nature of gossip is. Remember, gossip we have related to words like factual and the fact that it has a function. So gossip isn't insignificant necessarily. That's not what they're trying to say, right? And it's not about insignificant matters. Or even if it is about insignificant matters, it's still about people that we care about. That's what they're trying to suggest. These are the people that we are living with in the community, in the village. So that is not correct. Okay, B is the best answer there. Okay, question 74. According to the passage, the artists of the carvings on Romanesque church capitals seem to have. Okay, so this is referring to carvings and Romanesque church. I think a really useful word to look for would probably be Romanesque. That looks like it's pretty unique. I reckon I should be able to find that. And straight away I can see the word Romanesque church over here in the last paragraph. This is suggesting to me, I'm going to read down here, possibly towards the ending. If I go back to the question, I can see it's talking about carvings and artists and things like that. And if I go down and have a look, it definitely talks about carvings as well. Okay, so I believe that we'll start from here, let's say, okay? from As with the Carvings. Let's have a read. As with the carvings on capitals in a Romanesque church, there is an identity of spirit between what is shown and how it is shown, as if the portrayed were also the carvers. Okay, let's we might have to read a bit more later on, but let's just see what's going on. Now, what is it trying to say? Artists of the carvings on the Romanesque church capitals seem to have, imbued their work with their own being. Now, imbued, I believe, is to kind of put in, I guess, to insert, to put in their work with their own being. It's suggesting that they're putting a bit of themselves into their work, Is there any suggestions to that? Well, yes, because just with that sentence that we have highlighted, it says, as if the portrayed were also the carvers. Now, when they're talking about the portrayed, they're talking about the carvings themselves. They're trying to say that the carvings themselves, it's as if they were the carvers, the artists themselves. So they're putting a bit of themselves into their art or into their carvings. That's looking pretty good. Okay, let's have a look at options, the other options as well. Being incapable of judging their own work. So sorry about that. It's supposed to be own work. Being incapable of judging their own work. No, there's nothing in what we've read so far about saying that they can't judge their own work. That's a bit of a strange one. Concentrated as much on technical skills as on content. There's no references to technical skills. Again, being chiefly concerned with the religious and spiritual nature of the activity. No, there's no references to religious or spiritual natures or anything like that. There is references to the spirit. Now, if we go back and understand what it's referring to though, let's have another read. As with the carvings on the capitals in a Romanesque church, there is an identity of spirit between what is shown and how it is shown. Now, they talk about what they mean by the spirit in this case. They're really talking about the spirit as being, I guess, what the artists are putting into the carvings. So their spirit in this is more like their personality or, I guess, their characteristics. Okay, so the carvers are putting their own twist or putting a little bit about, portraying themselves in a way in the carvings. So the spirit is more to do with the carvers or the artist's own qualities, I suppose. That's what they mean by the word spirit in this case, not really in terms of religion and spirit. So A is looking a lot better. Okay. In other words, if we were to reword what they're trying to say in that sentence, it is best reworded as imbued their work with their own being, putting a bit of themselves into their work. Okay, question 75. According to the passage, both village gossip and the capitals on Romanesque churches are characterized by an identity between. Okay, so they're really making a comparison between village gossip. So remember, village gossip is considered like the storytelling here, like the stories between people. And then the capitals on the Romanesque churches, they're the carvings. Okay, so that's the carvings or the artwork. So they're trying to make a comparison because if you think about it, you've got the village people, you've got the gossipers. You've got the gossipers and their gossip. And then you've got the carvers and their carvings. Okay, just think about that. Okay, both gossip and their capitals, they're characterized, by an identity between. So is it between spirit and intellect? Is there some kind of references between spirit and intellect? I know we did talk about spirit in that paragraph, but remember what we were talking about in the previous question. We were talking about how that is more about the carvers putting a bit of themselves, a bit of their own qualities into their work. Okay, so yes, there is references to spirit, that's more about the qualities, but what about intellect? Is there anything about intellect that we've been referring to? Not really, okay? There hasn't been anything talking about intelligence necessarily, or the mind. So that's a bit of an odd one. Creator and creation. Now notice what I've done up there. When we are making the comparison between the gossipers and the carvers, the gossip is really the creation, these are the creations, okay? I don't know if I can fit this in. Okay, the gossip and stuff, these are the creations. So on the right hand side. Gossip is created by the gossipers. Carvings are created by the carvers. Okay, so these guys on the left, they're the creators. I believe that's what they're trying to get us to compare. So that's looking pretty good. Okay, let's just double check. Then C, we've got artist and technician. Again, I think they're trying to trick us a little bit because yes, there is references to artists, but then the artist and technician is usually a word for someone who kind of does technical work, I guess, or they do a lot of I don't know how to describe it now. They do a lot of the I think the practical, I guess, or the practical work, or the hands-on work, you could say. That's not really a suggestion here. Okay, they're not saying that there is an artist and then they kind of sub out their work to someone else to make their artwork realized. Okay, that's not really what's going on. So no, artist and technician, that's a bit dodge. Performer and spectator. Again, that doesn't really make sense. Okay, like we could say that the performer could be the gossiper, or the performer could be like the carver. Okay, but the thing that we're trying to kind of make a comparison with is carver to the carvings. The carvings and the gossip are the creations. They're not the spectators. They're not the things viewing or listening to the gossipers or the carvers. Okay, so the word spectator doesn't really make sense. So I hope you guys understand why I would choose B. Creator and creation is the best comparison or analogy, okay, if you were to make an analogy between gossipers and the carvers, the analogy is that one is a creator and one is the creation. Creator being the gossipers, for creation creating gossip, and then the carvers are creating carvings. So B's looking the best there. Okay, question 76. Which of the following seems to be the closest to the writer's view of art? I think this is a reference to the carvings, because if you were to look for the reference to the word art, you don't really see anything, but you can assume that art, that they're talking about the carvings. Okay, I'm just going to double check. Yeah, please guys, let me know if you see the word art anywhere, but I don't see it. I think it's referring to carvings. Okay, what could be closest to the writer's view? Now remember, the writer's view is specifically about gossip. Okay, this is mostly what the text was talking about. However, they did make a comparison between gossip and carvings, or gossip and art. So really, you can think, what is the writer's view about gossip? Okay, because they were really using art or carvings as an analogy for gossip. Okay, so is art or gossip in this case essentially about moral judgments? Okay, first one. Okay, remember the whole point of gossip was it's supposed to be factual, it's supposed to be, it has a function. And what is its function? The function is to help the village define itself. Okay, doesn't really sound like it's about moral judgments necessarily. So let's keep on going. Anything which is entertaining and makes life less boring. What's really interesting is the very first question, which was kind of trying to get us to think about what is gossip. If you recall, one of the ways they tried to describe gossip was that gossip was, let's go back actually, let's see if we can find out. Can we go backwards? Oh, can't go backwards, okay. I think he was saying something about gossip being amusing. Okay, now we know that's not true. Again, the words associated with gossip are more to do with it being factual again, or it having a function. So that's not sounding particularly good either. Let's have a look at C. Something constructed to make meaning out of experience. Okay, now here the word meaning and experience, maybe that's better, especially meaning, because remember, the whole function of gossip is that the village is able to define itself, which is very much about trying to get meaning. Okay, so that kind of makes sense. I also know, and I think I might have read a little bit, let's just have a quick look. Where is it? Okay. Yes, here we go. So this bit really wasn't actually, I don't think we read it before, but in the third paragraph, especially when it's talking about comments being subjects to comments, I think there was an excerpt taken out from there. If you keep on going, it does talk about the riddle of existence. What it's trying to say is that the whole point of gossip or commenting on gossip is that we're trying to make sense. The riddles are about things that don't make sense, right? And existence, which is talking about experiences, our life. So trying to make meaning out of experience. There's definitely kind of references to that from the words riddle of existence, and again the fact that it talks about gossip having the function of the village defining itself. So C is looking pretty good. And then just for completeness, let's have a look at D. Created out of a combination of skill and a sense of beauty. No, I mean, that could be true, that could be your view of art, but this is not what the text is talking about. It's not suggesting that gossip and art are about things like skill and beauty. It's more talking about we use gossip and we use art to try to make sense of ourselves and about other people, and I guess our experiences. So C probably makes the most sense there. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's something that I've been wanting to do for some time. Please like and subscribe if you'd like to see more of this. And again, one of the takeaways from this is if you can do section 1 questions, you can do section 3 questions and vice versa. There is a lot of crossover, especially in section 3 with those more wordy type of questions. Okay. All right, well, thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.